Call of Duty World War II was supposed to be the savior the COD community had been waiting for. At the end of the Future Fatigue era, the games leading up to this being Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, then Infinite Warfare. Fans were over the jetpack era and were begging for COD to go back to its roots and, more importantly, boots on the ground gameplay. Now, from my understanding, Sledgehammer Games actually wanted to make Advanced Warfare 2 for their next release. However, Activision stepped in and said they wanted them to make a World War II game and take the series back to its roots. And it's so funny because at the time, everyone looked at this as a huge dub from Activision. This was the right decision according to most people. But now, I would wager many people would have wanted to see Advanced Warfare 2 instead of this in retrospect. This poll, had I ran this in 2016, would be 99% in favor of World War II, I assure you. But now, you can see where the numbers actually lie, which is evidence to a point I'm going to hammer home later on in this video. But at this point in time, COD sales numbers had been on the decline over the past couple of years, and World War II was speculated to be the title that reverses that course and gets COD back to where it once was near its peaks. And did this strategy work? Well, it's complicated. World War II actually did fairly well initially in terms of sales numbers. This is likely due to it being heavily marketed as a return to form, so to speak, for the series. So this had a great impact on getting people in the door for sure, but how much success this game can really take credit for long term is certainly up for debate. I think World War II is one of the best examples of something being so painfully mid that it's almost worse than it being an outright bad game. And while it's not the embarrassing nightmare that is Call of Duty Vanguard, World War II still had a ton of wasted potential, huge development issues, especially with zombies, and leadership changes shortly after the game launched. But Call of Duty World War II was giving players exactly what it was they wanted, and were asking for at the time, and you'd be led to assume this would be a winning strategy. But you'll soon find out, giving players exactly what it is they're asking for can end up backfiring on you in ways you didn't expect. So, was Call of Duty World War II doomed from the start? Well, let's explore that, shall we? COD World War II is one of the more special games to me because it's probably the title I was the most personally involved with, especially in the beginning. But oddly enough, this was also the year I quit Call of Duty in some real sense to focus on another game I was really enjoying. So this is pretty much the only COD title that I didn't have my finger on the pulse of the community the whole way through. But what I mean by being personally involved, this was the first COD game I got invited to capture events at Sledgehammer, met everyone there, who were all exceptionally nice people, by the way. We got to see behind the curtain quite a bit, learned things behind the scenes, and I really felt I had direct communication with parts of this game that I haven't felt with any COD since. And I don't bring that up for no reason. If nostalgia is any indicator on how much I enjoy a game like this in retrospect, by that logic, this should be my favorite Call of Duty of all time because of how much close ties I had to the game. And while I do hold a bit of nostalgia for those times and the people I met, that has genuinely no bearing on how I feel about the actual final product of the video game itself. If that attachment was enough to make me enjoy the game more, I wouldn't have stopped uploading it after just a few months and shifted to spending my time and energy on a different game that was doing way better for me and that I was having much more fun with. So basically, the second half of World War II, I was pretty much checked out from. I would come back to play the new Zombies map whenever DLC dropped, but that was about the full extent of my play. And the multiplayer, I barely played at all when it launched, so in reviewing this, I was in sort of this unique experience where I was kind of playing the MP for the first time in a sense. So why am I telling you all this? It's important framing for how I approached talking about this game, just so you can understand what biases may or may not be at play.
And I would be hyped if it was any Call of Duty game, but the fact that Call of Duty is going back to its roots, I mean, I need to just calm down just slightly because I'm overhyped right now.
So anyways, with COD World War II, we now had a much more proven Sledgehammer on our hands. They helped get MW3 shipped during its disaster development year, and then they made Advanced Warfare pretty much independently. Now, with World War II, they had a much bigger team to work with and a vision from both Glenn Schofield and Michael Condrey, who during then were still the creative leaders of this project. Although that would change shortly after launch, they would become higher-ups at Activision, but not too long after getting promoted in Activision, would both ultimately resign and branch off to go join either 2K Games or form their very own studio and working on a new IP. And this change would actually shift the direction of the game very dramatically after Glenn and Michael's departure. But before we get there, we need to understand the circumstances of when this game launched and what expectations were like and that the community had. COD World War II didn't have an easy year. With fan expectations and excitement being higher than ever, this increased the pressure to deliver on a fantastic product, but more importantly, it went on to show a fundamental truth about the reality of gamers, and I include myself in this too, and this is the point I'm going to hammer home in this video. In a majority of cases, gamers don't know what it is they actually want until they get it. The community thought that a return to boots on the ground World War II era COD would cause a Phoenix-like comeback for the series, getting back in touch with its roots, or at the very least, be just like the good old days and everything would be just right in the world. But what happened was, a new but rapidly growing trend was skyrocketing in popularity, taking away attention from the old COD formula. This was at the first really early stages of the rise of Battle Royale games, and Fortnite in particular. Call of Duty World War II was absolutely dominated by the meteoric rise of Fortnite Battle Royale, and this came out at the height of PUBG's popularity. While Call of Duty was still massively popular by anyone's standards, it could simply not compete with all the attention in the gaming landscape being on the newly growing Battle Royale format. Everyone was talking about this new BR thing and not Call of Duty. And that's what I mean when I say gamers don't really know what it is they want until they get it. We didn't know we wanted Battle Royale games like this until we got them. While as a community, we may have claimed to have wanted classic COD, the numbers certainly don't lie. And I would wager a ton of more casual COD players probably played World War II for a bit on launch, got bored quick, and then went and played Fortnite or PUBG for the rest of the year. That was certainly the case for me, a lot of my friends, and fellow content creators. I say this because Call of Duty didn't have the space to dominate that year, and it shows when push comes to shove, people will likely choose something new and fresh and well-crafted innovation over a dated, older, nostalgic formula.
Yep.
Same exact thing happened this year as well with Vanguard. COD was subpar, and Elden Ring was something new and fresh that actually outsold Call of Duty for that year. A very rare occurrence, I might add, for that to ever happen. Despite the overpowering force of brand loyalty, a truly well-crafted game was able to take the spotlight this year, and good. But that's my ultimate point. It's the never-ending battle between the tried-and-true nostalgia and well-executed fresh innovation. And that poll I showed earlier shows all of our biases as gamers. It's possible we really don't know what it is we want until we get it.
Big time, big time. And having been a fan of the...
Cameron, don't be afraid of the microphones. Come on,
right.
they're not going to hurt you.
There we go.
Scooch in.
Check one. Sibilance. We here? Oh, wow. Hi.
A lot of scooching. All right. I'm a full service moderator.
And all that entails, right?
Can I change seats?
No, you're in the perfect seat. Don't worry about it. I have a new idea for a Michael Condrey horror game. Do you want to hear it?
I think I'm living it right now.
Hey guys, just want to say before we go any further, if you're enjoying the video, drop a like, that'd be awesome. And if you're enjoying the content as well, be sure to subscribe. It's completely free, and we're literally about to hit 500,000. In fact, we may hit it before this video goes public, I'm not sure. But in any case, I want to give a preemptive thank you for 500,000. That is absolutely insane. And listen, don't worry, we're going to be covering the rest of the COD series. I'm going to be throwing other games in here and there as well. And if you want to become a channel member, these videos do take a really long time to produce. So if you want to help support the content, obviously no pressure, but that's an option if you would like to do so. Otherwise, just sit back, relax, enjoy the video, and let's continue. With all that in mind though, there's nothing inherently wrong with nostalgia in the right context. It wasn't like World War II didn't try anything to innovate on itself. One of the core features on paper with World War II, as designed by Michael and Glenn, was supposed to be this big open social space, the headquarters, where you interact with and meet new people, prep with your squad before you go and play. It was clearly inspired by the Tower in Destiny, but it would be Call of Duty's take on that idea. Headquarters was envisioned to be this game changer for Call of Duty that takes the social element to a whole new level. Even though this was basically just a main menu with extra steps, in all honesty, you'd have all sorts of cringe emotes to use. You can watch people overreact to opening supply drops.
He's a one heroic weapon. Oh, thank you. Heroic. Yes! Yes! Oh my god, heroic for common! Heroic! Oh my god!
Legendary. That's alright. Is that the only thing you can get in supply drops is grips? Grips is so annoying.
And 1v1 people who only lost because they're too busy sleeping with your mother.
Stop using your stupid weapon.
It feels like the headquarters was something that needed a little more time to be fully developed and fleshed out, or should have just stayed in the drafts. Because I didn't play a whole lot of MP at all when this launched, I forgot how weird it is. It's honestly kind of awkward opening supply drops in front of other players, and it's not really this interactable social space. Most players are just standing there, farting around in the menus, and my god do they ever. The menus of World War II are some of the most unnecessarily complex and diluted, like I don't know where anything is ever. World War II is seriously built like a mobile game, where the out-of-game cosmetics and loot boxes are scientifically engineered to be the maximum amount of grindy, annoying, just to a point to not make you want to quit, but make you want to spend money to acquire what you want. I remember it being a meme at the time, but it's true. With the absurd amount of pistol grips you'd get from these crates, most of these beautiful works of art are pretty much just calling card textures more or less slapped onto the pistol model. It's so lazy, and it's there just to be filler for supply crates. I cannot stress enough how insanely diluted everything is. Even playlists and game modes. There's like 40 variants of everything. Mastercrafts can be hard to find sometimes. Game modes exist only to have 0 players in them. Even the zombies menu is so badly thought out and executed, like that should have been the one thing that's the most straightforward. Like, there's a different menu option specifically for DLC 3, The Tortured Path, and you can't do the Easter egg unless you play it through the Tortured Path playlist and not through custom games. It's like, did anyone think through this stuff at all? Not gonna lie, as I took my revisit here, the unnecessary complication of the main menus, the armory credit stuff, the supply drops, extremely grindy challenge systems, and just the sheer scale of the out-of-game systems in general was kind of a big turnoff to me. It felt much more forethought went into making these menus as extra as possible, while skimping on the actual core gameplay, but we haven't even got there yet. Now, from my understanding, World War II in general took a massive change in direction in both the MP side of things and zombies, which I can speak a bit more concretely on later in the video, but the game took itself so seriously when it launched to a point where it was actually kind of boring. But near the end of its life cycle, multiplayer was completely overhauled, began to implement more fun things like silly sandbox maps, adding Tesla guns from zombies into the multiplayer and so on, but the only thing that came out of this whole thing relatively unscathed was the campaign. This was the experience Glenn and Michael were there from start to finish. Losing your lead creative directors in game development is almost never a good thing, but one may make the argument that at least the multiplayer was made significantly better after they left. And even with zombies, while this didn't see a complete massive overhaul, the team size even shrunk down to just a few people, but they totally changed the tone from the beginning of the game. It was focused on the horror aspect initially, but it gets more what I would call adventurous instead as the maps go on. The quality of those maps are up for debate, which we'll get to, but there's a lot to unpack with this game, and to really understand why I think World War II is just so mediocre, let's dive into each aspect of the game. World War II just had the straight up 3 classic modes, no survival or anything, no like secret fourth mode. It has a standard campaign, multiplayer, and zombies, very, run of the mill. And let's see how each of these hold up with a fresh eye in 2022. With the campaign of World War II, Sledgehammer also wanted to walk back the direction many CODs in the era in which it focused on the super soldier, to use their words, basically the player's character being more special than the average soldier, and come back to just being a regular soldier on the battlefields of World War II. I forgot just how strangely structured this campaign is before I went and replayed it. It's kinda hard to talk about the single player in this game in the same way we've done for other campaigns. Why? World War II's campaign is structured kind of like a TV show, and what I mean is there's really no like premise or main plot that it follows along. I mean, in terms of the literal events, it's following you as you close in on Germany near the end of the war, but it jumps all over the place in terms of like how much time occurs in between each mission, and people just show up and go without any ultimate consequence to the plot, and really at no point is there a main villain exactly, which is completely fine to me and actually works in this game's favor. The drama and central conflict comes from the people within your own unit. The triangle of drama is between Private Red Daniels, a young Texas man who is now serving and you play as a majority of the game, Pearson, played by Josh Duhamel, and Turner, played by Merrick from Ghost.
He's a bit of a dick.
Pearson is the hard-ass, duty first, men second kind of leader. Turner is the bit more compassionate and understanding one, and most of the central conflict is how these two different leaders approach situations and their methods. You're also joined alongside your best friend Zussman, played by not Tobey Maguire, and he's there to be the main emotional connection friend to Daniels and the player by extension. There's a bunch of supporting side characters as well. You have the classic nerd glasses character in every World War II media ever, and you have the guy who's kind of at odds with Zussman on account of his ethnicity and so on. The supporting characters don't really get a whole lot of development, to be honest, but they serve each mission well. Sledgehammer just wanted to tell the story of World War II with enough accuracy to honor it while still making an entertainment product, and you can tell they were inspired by shows like Band of Brothers and such. In fact, the campaign is best analyzed in chunks like a TV show because it jumps all over the place and things just occur. Each mission is approximately, this is the episode where blank happens, and that's both a positive and a negative thing. It helps in the sense that they can tell a wide variety of stories and experiences with characters from all over, but that does come at the cost of the overall strength of the main story. The campaign opens super strong. It's a really intense and brutal take on the D-Day Normandy invasion. The tone is set to be super dark and serious right away. If you've played older games like Medal of Honor and such, you've certainly played this experience already, but it does look way nicer graphically here. Touching on gameplay for a moment, health regeneration is not like anything we see from COD typically. This is a homage to those older World War II games with manual health packs to find and used to regenerate HP. In fact, all the supporting characters throughout the missions have some kind of ability or equipment that you can, get from them on command. This is supposed to make you consider how closely you work with your team and coordinate with them. Ammo's much harder to replace in this game, so the ammo and health packs are actually key in getting through parts of the story. Speaking of which, the opening mission concludes on Zussman getting severely wounded as he attempted to save you. He's in real danger of dying as you drag him to the medical bay to get help. This part's actually, well done. It's pretty emotional.
Daniels, I'm here. Help me. I need a goddamn medic!
It's very well executed, and it does great to set up the events of the game and gives you some insight into each character's personality traits.
You'll take care of him. I need you with me, Daniels.
You've successfully stormed the beaches of Normandy, and with Daniel's heroicness, Zussman was able to get medical attention just in time and was saved and recovering. You then begin to cut through France, and you get some more good character stuff along the way that begins to shine light on why Pearson is so antagonistic and the complexities of the situation.
Fun's not allowed under Pearson. You know why he's always writing you? Kasserine Pass.
Lost my best friends there.
Yeah, earned him an Article 15 and a demotion. He had to be a hard ass, and his men paid the price. Mission was Fubar, a massacre.
As you cut through parts of France, you begin to bond with your squad a little bit more. Pearson makes life as hard as physically possible for you and your unit, and some real tension is growing between him and Turner. Now, while like I said, there is a focus on this unit and these few characters, occasionally there are some guest appearances from other characters from different nations that come into the picture. Again, very much like a TV show. Now, another component to World War II's campaign is how they handle diversity. And yes, we're going to talk about this. Sledgehammer did it really well in World War II, where they introduce entirely realistic and good characters like Vivian, a female officer from the British forces, and Rousseau, who is a French resistance fighter. And that's good. The diversity here is great even. It allows for stories that to be told that, you wouldn't have otherwise the opportunity to see.
You actually mentioned that there would be women characters in this game. Now, lots of fans have been asking whether or not that is historically accurate. What do you think about that?
It is historically accurate. We knew that we'd have a challenge a little bit with diversity. After doing a lot of research, like the French Resistance, they had a lot of female fighters. So we have a French Resistance character, Rousseau, who leads one of the Paris resistance groups.
It's a far better incorporation of diversity in a way that's still in service of the larger narrative taking place, instead of another game where the diversity is central to the whole narrative and may or may not have characters that were generated by an AI diversity algorithm. They always felt natural, and they're actually great in this story. I feel like the only problem with Vivian, and maybe a little bit Rousseau, is the fact that they're not really in the game enough, honestly. Vivian is around for like one mission and a cutscene, and you never see her again and has no ultimate purpose. Rousseau gets a little more development. You know, we learned that the German officer Heinrich hunted down everyone she loved, her husband, son, and so on. And the gameplay of the actual mission where you play as Rousseau is not only my favorite mission in this game by far, but it's one of the best in Call of Duty, period. You have to check your papers and remember your fake cover story as you sneak around and have conversations with people to find the right target in the castle. You have to swap out your fake briefcase to get one armed with explosives, all without breaking cover. If you forget your story or get details wrong, the Germans can get sussy of you and the whole thing can be blown.
Die Tasche wurde unten überprüft.
Fräulein, Ihre Tasche! Sofort!
This is easily my favorite mission in the game. You can play it so many different ways, and while it always ends in the same outcome, you kill Heinrich in his office and break the lines for your forces to arrive, it's a wonderful switch up from the gameplay that actually stunned me how good it was. Yes, you do have some cringe moments like the embarrassing train sequence.
You don't want to do something that's too over the top.
There's absolutely some filler mission stuffed in here, but all in all, the first third or so moves at a pretty decent pace. However, the second chunk of this campaign is a little less engaging. There's some unbelievably boring sequences with the tank driving, and even the planes are somehow really boring in this game too. Most of the second act of this game is the escalation and tension between Pearson and Turner as you fight through some of the most important battles near the end of World War II. The conflict grows as you disobey orders when raiding a village to save some civilians that are trapped and stuck in an underground cellar. You have to go back and save a child that got left behind, nearly compromising the mission, but you make it out eventually. This is the impasse where the tension between Pearson and Turner reaches a bit of a breaking point.
They shot up the truck!
Erika! Bitte, Erika! Wach auf!
She's gone.
Nein!
Go on! Go! What the hell are you doing? Following orders. Everyone back to the hotel. Move, move, move!
So the second act continues, we enter Germany, and we come to realize that Daniel's girl back at home is pregnant, giving him even more reason to fight. We also learn that Daniel's brother Paul was killed by a wolf on account of him being too clumsy and scared to fire a shot and ultimately save his brother when he was a kid, setting up the motivation and payoffs for later with our main character. We learned that Pearson's more tough demeanor is partly a result of a battle gone wrong in which he tried to save all his men but ended up getting them all killed. A massive stain on not only his reputation, but something he can also never forget. What follows next is a bunch of missions shooting through bad guys in these famous battles, and this gives me a good opportunity to come back to gameplay for a moment. Each mission of this game had something called heroic actions, and these would often be something like saving a wounded soldier crying out for help or something along those lines. These were time sensitive, so if you missed them, too bad. But ultimately, while they're fun to do, don't have much effect on anything really. Some just die even if you save them still. There's also no traditional intel pickups. This game has mementos that can be found in each level, little trinkets and whatnot that have some kind of small backstory. The pacing of the gameplay is also pretty good, as stated earlier. It's literally paced like you're watching TV. Sniping has this cool function where holding your breath makes everything move in slow motion. It made the sniping super satisfying and very enjoyable in this game as well. But getting back to it, as you enter Germany, you have the most intense fight yet. One of these battles takes place in what's called the Death Factory. Here, you have the most brutal battle so far. In fact, after destroying some German tanks, Turner gets gravely wounded and tries to hold them off to let you and your unit escape. This puts Pearson fully in charge, and without the more soft approach of Turner to balance him out, you have the full tyranny in approach from Pearson. He has to deal with not only the death of his ally, but now shoulder the full responsibility of leading the squad. This takes us to the Battle of the Bulge, an unbelievably cold and brutal fight in the snow. After this is over, a German carrying vital info attempts to escape but is ultimately captured.
Reading this right, it's the last bridge standing across the Rhine.
Well, ain't that something, Fritz?
This gives you crucial details on how to close out the war. In your attempt to do just that, eventually you invade a German base, but in an unfortunate turn of events, you lose a hold of Zussman and he gets captured by the Germans, and you fail in your attempt to rescue him on the spot. This is the only part in the game in which there's some kind of real bad guy setup, and it's like right at the very end. Well, I mean, you know, besides the obvious one, there's no real main target other than this guy who sends Zussman and a few others off to forced labor camps. World War II has a really different approach to its climax than many COD campaigns do. Normally, you know, you're building up tension throughout the whole game to confront the main bad guy at the end. World War II ends off with a seemingly insignificant battle from a gameplay perspective, but this is essentially how the actual plot ends, getting to the heart of Germany and forcing a surrender. However, you do have an epilogue sequence after this that is technically the real peak of the story. This takes a very somber and realistic moment to let the horrors of these POW camps soak in.
These were our guys.
Take out your camera. The world's gotta know. They had them living worse than animals. From the looks of it, they were beaten, starved, and worked to the bone.
And the atrocities against humanity that occurred there. This is the moment we didn't get in Vanguard. This ties everything together and makes you understand what this whole war was fought over for in the first place. However, you suspect Zussman is still out there, and instead of letting your brother down all those years ago, you go and rescue him.
Brad, take the shot! Take the shot! Take the shot!
Zussman is barely alive at this point, but because of Daniel's bravery, he was able to save him. You then cut to post-war, and you see the send-off of all your friends and squad mates who are about to go out and live their lives. Even Pearson, his tough demeanor drops a little bit to have a nice final moment with Daniels. And Zussman, while still is in bad shape, is alive and thankful. Daniels makes it back to his home where he's able to reconcile his faults and guilt from the past and move forward into his future with his girl and his child. So that's how the story plays out. I think it goes without saying this campaign does not have multiple endings. No out-of-game upgrades or even any creative class options. It's very straightforward and run-of-the-mill. And that's probably my biggest criticism of this campaign. The literal story is fine. You know, it's easy to follow and logical. The characters are alright. Like I said, some of them just come and go with no real purpose. And the gameplay, it's not really anything I haven't played before. All in all, I have to say the World War II campaign is just extremely generic. It's not even bad. It's just old hat. If you've played Medal of Honor games or watched any World War II related media, you've already experienced this story before in some sense. To be fair, there's only so much you can do story-wise with historical material, and the characters don't elevate it to a level that makes it stand out to me, and you can predict where the story is going to go from the first mission. There's no surprises or anything out of the ordinary. It's fine, just really, really average. It starts out super strong. The opening missions are great hooks, like I said, but it definitely sags a lot in the middle. Like, it's a pretty long campaign in terms of hours, and most of the middle bits feel very filler and can just get dull after a while. But the conclusion and finale ends up being pretty strong for the story material as well. I don't know if it was just me, but for context, I was playing all this on a PS5, and the mid-game, like, you know, CGI cutscenes would always drop to 30 FPS and then go back to 60 when the gameplay starts again. I know Advanced Warfare didn't have this problem on PS5 because I just got done playing that, so I don't know what was going on there, but it was kind of jarring, and you can probably see it in the gameplay. But aside from that, it's a perfectly serviceable campaign. I just don't have much else to say about it. I mean, there's nothing to dig further at, good or bad. Overall, it's just very generic. It gets the job done, but nothing that special. I think if this was your first ever form of media encountering World War II material, this will probably be more memorable to you, but if not, this campaign is extremely forgettable after a little while. So you'll recall I said at the beginning, I didn't play much World War II MP when this came out. I had maybe 10 hours total played throughout its entire life before I came to revisit it. So in a real way, I was ready to approach this experience with fresh eyes, unbiased by any outside influence, the most pure experience I could have. It's also crucial to understand that World War II's multiplayer underwent some massive overhauls during its prime, mostly after Glenn and Michael left the studio. Now, I do remember this game had a rough launch. The MP didn't even work the day it released, the server was broken, and they reverted a lot of good changes back from the beta. Safe to say, this didn't make the best first impression with people, including me. Now, we don't have time to document all the little changes this game saw when it released, but suffice to say, World War II's launch had its fair share of snags and obstacles, but as the year went on, fundamentally changed many key systems of the game for better or for worse. And for context, as I went to revisit, I'm of course playing the most up-to-date version of the game. So with World War II on launch, I can only recall the multiplayer experience being horribly boring and not very engaging when it released. So I won't speak much on my experience there. I'm mostly going to focus on my most recent experience with it. And so I want to start with the things I really like about World War II's multiplayer. I noticed that after some time, Sledgehammer began to integrate much more creative and fun ideas into the core of the experience. I noticed this especially at capture events, but for example, there's a mode called Hardpoint, and it's literally just a standard game of Hardpoint, but there's zombies that spawn in and make holding that area much more challenging, on top of already worrying about the actual enemy team players as well. There's some really fun stuff in a few of the war mode maps, which Call of Duty was heavily pushing as a new and innovative way to play. This mode is alright in general. I'm not in love with it, admittedly, but it feels moderately fun most of the time, and it's definitely a different tone and feel compared to the standard multiplayer modes. Each war map is significantly different from one another in both objectives and mechanics, but some maps like this have events where you can get the Tesla guns from zombies and flat out use them against other players, for example. All that stuff is great, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Also, a lot of the DLC maps I think are aesthetically very pleasing, make sense in the era, given the time frame, and are laid out very well. I clarify DLC because some of the base maps are just truly poorly made, and the game launched with, I think, the least amount of maps ever for Call of Duty MP up to that point, so that certainly didn't help its case. I mean, I like the variety of game modes in theory. Like I said, there's a ton of playlists and different modes like Infection, Gun Game, Prop Hunt, etc., but for every game I'm playing in these reviews, I tend to stick to TDM primarily just to get the most baseline experience possible. That makes them easy to compare to one another as well. I think this game also does a really good job at bringing World War II era gear into a video game that makes them plausible to use. There's a fair amount of variety in theory, and the weapon balance is decent all things considered. The game's time to kill on paper feels very nice too, and gunfights feel earned most of the time. And I do have to say, I like how the game looks visually on most maps. I'm aware I called this game visual pig slop in my Advanced Warfare review, and I still stand by that statement for some parts of this game. However, it doesn't actually look too bad here, it's just very map dependent a lot of the time. And I like the variety in attachments. There's some super interesting ones, not much in the way of like sandboxy items, but guns feel just customizable enough without taking it to an absolute extreme like Vanguard. But to be real, that's just about it for my things that I like about World War II's multiplayer. The guns are fine for the most part until you realize just how many good weapons are locked behind grindy RNG challenges or unlocking them via supply drops or other methods. In fact, most good weapons in this game I didn't even have access to. The EMP SMG, for example, I noticed I was seeing a lot in my matches, but when I went to go get it, I had to unlock it through random supply drops or do something absurdly grindy to get it faster. fine, whatever, I'll just stick to my PPSH then. But then, I can't even really make the exact class I want because World War II MP has the systems called divisions, and at launch, this was way worse for sure. It didn't allow you certain attachments and restricted you to just a few items unless you ran an entirely different division. Now, each of these divisions come with their own properties and mechanics that make them unique. That's fine, but when you then include the basic trainings on top of that, it makes the game's mechanics, so unnecessarily clumped together and more so divided, hence the name, and you can't really even play the way you want to. Like, there really isn't even perks exactly. All of those are built into the divisions and basic trainings. These properties are exclusive to the division you're running, so for example, you want more primary attachments, you have no other choice but to run infantry with no exceptions. Most of the basic trainings as well are just totally useless, and nobody in their right mind would select these. Divisions and basic trainings are essentially getting perks packaged in bulk. You get the whole thing, take it or leave it. You're unable to pick and choose smaller parts of these individually, like what you'd get with the more classic perk system. I get what they were going for here, but in practice, it makes it feel like much of the content is walled off to me unless I fundamentally change my entire playstyle and method of how I like to enjoy the game. I have to conform my playstyle to the dictates of the divisions and basic trainings rather than them bolstering the way I enjoy playing. Also, another big thing I don't care for are the kill streaks. Sledgehammer has always struggled a bit in this department if you ask me, but in World War II, they walked back a really cool feature from Advanced Warfare. In that game, you could customize and upgrade kill streaks by making the score requirement for them slightly higher. In World War II, you can only upgrade kill streaks if you have the Blitzkrieg basic training, and they're not even given a choice this time. You just get a standard bonus on each one. I think World War II actually might have the most boring and underwhelming kill streaks in any Call of Duty. Not only are they just not very effective objectively, they're just not that special or memorable either. Like, you tell me what the difference is between these 3 random airplanes. They're just so generic and cookie cutter. The Max Streak, the ball turret gunner, is so insanely underwhelming and boring, it's not even remotely in the same league as the Paladin, even from their last game in AW, or the gold standard of AC-130s and chopper gunners for sure. This means the bread and butter about what makes Call of Duty gameplay fun is already severely dampened, and to make things worse, this game has a nuke, the V2 rocket at 25 gun streak kills, but the kicker is you can't get it unless you prestige each division once or something, and unless they've changed it, you literally can't just be good in the game and get rewarded. You have to have previously grinded playstyles you don't want to use to even have the ability to acquire it. Like, really? When it comes to core gameplay, this is where I was the most shocked. I actually thought I was going to enjoy it much more than I did, but I realized very quickly, this game has absolutely no sauce. The movement and therefore the way you interact with the maps and engagements are so neutered in this game. They're like, obviously there's no jetpacks, that goes without saying, and there's no sliding at all because they replaced it with the dolphin dive, and that leaves you with literally no other way to be creative in the way that you maneuver and engage in fights besides the classic jump or drop shot. But even then, their effectiveness has been muffled in this game. It just feels like the most basic cut and dry movement toolkit with no swagger to it whatsoever. At least in Modern Warfare 2019 and Cold War, you can do a little more to differentiate the way that you play and engage in gunfights. World War II, in terms of how you fundamentally move, is the most sterile and sauceless game in recent memory. And this hit especially hard considering the 3 games that came before this were all jetpack advanced movement CODs, and to go back to something so basic and neutered just felt really stale. And remember how I said gunfights actually feel good? Well, that's still true, and I believe that. And when people are actually engaging in real gunfights in this game, it's a lot of fun. But the problem is, people play this game the same way that they play Ghosts. Albeit, it's not nearly as bad in World War II as it is in Ghosts. I want to be crystal clear about that. But people still use the most corny and boring methods of play ever. World War II Sandbox even kind of promotes the most gremlin-y playstyles I've ever encountered. When I was playing, I was noticing I was very rarely ever getting actually outgunned. Most of my deaths were either from grenades, which are absurdly overpowered in this game, incendiary shells.
Incendiary rounds for your shotgun, you can use that one. But if you do that, just know that you're a fucking loser and everyone on the game hates you for doing that. That shit shouldn't even be in the game.
And gremlin-y corner campers and LMGs that can shoot through 8 feet of rock-hard steel. And rifle grenade launchers, or some combination of all those things. I get so frustrated with games that punish me for playing aggressive and forcing situations, and I hate getting killed in ways that don't feel earned, but I die just to like a one-time gimmick or something. Here's a good example of how they messed up something extremely important. If you've seen my Ghost review, you've heard my reasoning why bouncing Bettys are just way better designed than the damn IED. If you haven't seen it, basically the conclusion was, one is reactable from the player regardless of like perks or equipment, whereas the other is not. World War II has the bouncing Betty, thank God, but they only get it half right. You can react to it, but you still take damage. If you don't react at all, you die, but even so, you still get punished even for picking the right option, and 9 times out of 10, you still die as they'll come to finish you off with their last bullet or something, or with wallbanging, for example. In World War II, there is literally no point to taking cover at all. Wallbangs are absolutely busted and beyond absurd here. I could go on with more examples, but I think it's better I just show you. We now come to my favorite part of the show, where you get to see why I was over this game after playing it for just a couple of days.
Starting to think that they just like don't give a fuck and they just throw the game out and say they'll fix stuff and then they just don't care.
Stepping away from core gameplay and maps for a moment, the HQ and out-of-game progression systems are an actual joke. All the functions of the quartermaster, officer for challenges, and the way these reward you with supply drops and armory credits were literally just engineered to be as grindy as possible, just to a point where you don't quit, or better yet, just cave and spend money to acquire them. Sure, there's a lot to unlock, but it's like all of this stuff was made as a smokescreen to compensate for the fact that the actual gameplay isn't all that fun. Without all this extra stuff to grind for, there's virtually no reason to play this game. What I'm trying to say is all this stuff is a cover-up for the fact that the game's boring. The gameplay is simply a vehicle to get rewards, instead of the gameplay and standard progression feeling rewarding intrinsically. This is the biggest sin of World War II, if you ask me. The shallowness of the core gameplay and then the lackluster reward system on top of that just do not complement one another at all in this game. It's such an outdated model for monetization and progression, it would thankfully be abandoned after this game. And as much as you might not like the Battle Pass model that newer Call of Duty has been using, it's so much better than whatever the hell was going on in this game. They got it so backwards with World War II. The out-of-game rewards should bolster your in-game experience, which should still be the primary reason you play, you know, for the actual game. Instead, they made a game as a vehicle for unlocks. I just find this mind-numbingly dull, and it's not even outright bad to me like Ghost. That game has some cardinal sins in its multiplayer. In contrast, I just find World War II, from its maps, movement, kill streaks, and so on, unbelievably dry, boring, and dull. Also, I don't understand this at all. Advanced Warfare raised the kill cap for Team Deathmatch to 100. This was perfect and should have been the new standard going forward. In World War II, they reverted back to 75 kills, and like every time I was getting something going or I was trying for big streaks, the game would just end. It's just so plain. Like I said, it's almost worse than me just outright hating it for some reason, and I just don't feel much good or bad with this MP. It's the very definition of mediocre or average, and in some sense, I've already played it in World at War or virtually any other World War II game. At least it has some cool features like emblem editors, 1v1s in HQ. War mode is a fun take on COD team-based gameplay and whatnot. I know I'm being kind of hard on the game right now, but I actually thought I was going to enjoy it much more since people had just told me beforehand about how much better it had gotten compared to when it released. And I don't doubt that at all, but that didn't change the fact that it's like the most bland COD multiplayer ever. Look, if you like sitting in a corner with a bouncing Betty behind you, holding one angle day in and day out and find that fun, more power to you. I'll just never understand that, and it's not for me. There's just really nothing about this multiplayer that's interesting or depthful enough to keep me engaged. Like I said, the war mode stuff is fun. Some of these silly game modes I actually had a really good time with, but the standard core multiplayer experience is just so insufferably boring. I want to be really clear. World War II multiplayer is by no means bad. It's just stale and tired. There's nothing that wows me or felt like was unexpected. While it has some neat ideas, the execution in World War II could not be a more accurate description of mediocrity. To me, the player counts of this game goes to show that we really don't know what it is we want, and this should have satisfied everybody, but like I said, the numbers don't lie. This should be used as the clearest example of why fan service, as it were, can backfire hard on you. It's like when you take a small child out and they scream and cry to go get ice cream, but once they have it, they don't even eat it, and then they leave to go play Fortnite. So, World War II Zombies is about to be an interesting discussion. It's exactly like Black Ops 4 in the sense that whether you personally enjoyed the overall offering or not, it is not at all what was originally intended to be, at least later in the year that is. And I can speak very concretely on a lot of this stuff because I either saw this stuff myself or talked to developers firsthand about things. World War II Zombies was primarily developed and crafted by Cameron Dayton, who previously worked on Overwatch and wrote a few novels before coming over to make World War II Zombies, and the Zombies team at first was much larger. It got progressively smaller as the DLC cycle went on. Originally, a lot of the ex-Dead Space guys were on this project, but by the end of the year, I think the Zombies team was like 5 or 6 people total. Now, the thing is, World War II is all over the place. There's some genuinely really good experiences here, and some absolutely bottom-of-the-barrel garbage as well.
Are you sitting there thinking like, we should have more girls in this, or is it like, no, we need to get the right characters, the right things, how it works as a plot? No. And I swear to God, move on that microphone or I'm going to come over there and push you in so hard.
So,
World War II Zombies suffered from a combination of not enough time in the oven and Activision rearranging things mid-DLC season. For example, World War II Zombies was supposed to have a DLC map set in Egypt, and the tombs and pyramids were going to be the theme and scenery, but we never got this map, obviously. However, you can see assets that were already developed for this map being used in the multiplayer, so at one point this was being worked on. Also, if you didn't know, World War II Zombies DLC 2 is called The Shadowed Throne. This map was actually supposed to be DLC 3 instead, meaning most likely Egypt would have been DLC 1, but what we got instead in the current game for DLC 3 is The Tortured Path. And we're going to get to it, but if you know anything about this, it's an abomination of an experience, almost on the same level as Duran Fong in a lot of ways. But this is divided into 3 submaps, and the second one takes place on a boat. And this map was supposed to be its own fully fledged zombies map in World War II, but because Voyage of Despair was being developed at the same time on Black Ops 4, Activision made Sledgehammer scrap most of it since they didn't want 2 similar boat-themed maps coming out closely to each other, and then they had to cobble together the Tortured Path.
Really fortunate, I'm really grateful that the cast. Oh, no. Terrified now. Yeah.
Full service moderator.
Yeah, they're.
And it's funny, the ship map is the best part of that whole DLC. This underwater bit is literally the only reason worth playing it for. It's just things like that, you know? I even asked Cameron Dayton personally about Double Pack-a-Punch. To this day, it's one of my more popular videos on my channel, and in a post-Black Ops 3 and IW Zombies world, a game with no Double Pack-a-Punch just seemed wrong or dated, or even flat-out lazy. Basically, in a roundabout way, the answer I got was just ultimately they didn't have enough time. While they had plans to add a double pack-a-punch ability to every map, with all the moving parts of maps being scrapped and so on, it just wasn't as high on the priority list, and sadly, this feature just got caught in the crossfire. So I bring all that up to say, if you enjoyed World War II Zombies and like all of it, great. Like, just know this was the watered-down version of what they wanted to have happen. Now, World War II, for all of its problems, has some of the best ideas in zombies. Not execution of said ideas necessarily, but great ideas on paper nevertheless. For example, perhaps one of my favorite things about the Final Reich, this map has a main quest, so to speak, where it guides you throughout the map and a course of, discovery and mystery, a guidebook providing hints and clues, leading you to a final conclusion and a boss fight. But it also has a proper Easter egg as well, a hardcore version of that quest, if you will, with very different steps and more difficult challenges to get a slightly different outcome. This means the map can be enjoyed both by casual and hardcore zombie fans alike, and I think this idea should be implemented in modern Treyarch Zombies games moving forward as well. It's kind of sad though, the map's hardcore Easter egg got solved by some of us who had the game a few days early, so effectively, before the game was even available to the world, its deepest secrets had already been found, and the devs had to awkwardly provide damage control for the outraged community. But another great idea World War II Zombies had was the implementation of operators and a cannon crew. One complaint I often see about Cold War Zombies was the fact that there's no main crew to get attached to or deliver story in a meaningful way. And fair enough, but World War II had a main crew, Drosten, played by David Tennant, Marie, played by Catherine Winnick, Olivia, played by Elodie Young, and Jefferson, played by the Arby's guy.
Arby's, we have the meat. I play this badass dude, okay?
My point is essentially, you can play as this crew or swap out with operators acquired via challenges in-game, and some of them are pretty difficult to get. You can play as a zombie, for example, by doing every main Easter egg in the game. It's actually pretty dope. Point is, you default as a main crew, but can opt in for a different character if you want. This is how to do it going forward if anyone at Treyarch or Sledgehammer is watching this video. Or you might even take it a step farther and make it so you can only play as an operator once you've completed a map's main Easter egg once. That way, you get the vanilla experience at least one time, and then from that point on, you have the privilege to play it with whoever you like after. Anyways, some other basic systems of this Zombies game was the first inclusion of the field upgrade kind of ability-based gameplay we've seen in both Cold War and Vanguard. It's way better done in Cold War, but World War II began this trend, and you can select a basic ability along with a few minor traits to complement it. I have to be honest, I'm not in love with this stuff. I tend to not like out-of-game progression systems in Zombies. This includes field upgrades, weapon kits, and so on. I prefer everything to be acquirable in-game if all possible, but it is what it is here. World War II also has some paid systems in the form of zombie supply drops. These can give you consumables, which are an inferior system to not only gobblegums, but F&F cards and elixirs. Or self-revives. Yeah, you know that mechanic that used to be free, getting back up after you died? Well, you have to pay for that now. Accidentally go down because you were too busy getting hella Tinder matches? Well, it's going to be 20 big ones to continue your game. Oh, you don't have it? Okay, good night then. I'm exaggerating that, of course, but the fact that self-revives are in supply drops is not a joke. This is a slap in the face to the Zombies player base, and Activision paid dearly with its reputation for it when this game launched. The consumables in general are just stale and not interesting at all in a sandbox way like gums are, or even some elixirs. They're just so bland. So with the general menus and out-of-game systems covered, I suppose we should get into maps. So this map on disc, the Final Reich, was actually supposed to be called Army of the Dead at first, but I won't get too much into that. But this map is by far the best experience in World War II Zombies. It would all be downhill from here, unfortunately, but this map is set in Middelburg, Germany, a sleepy, quiet town, but as you dig deeper, it gets even more sinister. This is a good example of Zombies usually at least getting its map on disc right. I already talked about the Easter egg structure, so I won't reiterate on that here. Needless to say, it's a fantastic fantastic approach to general gameplay. The Final Reich really nails it from its tone to its layout. Now, it does have some corny elements. It's got these random jump scares that can occur, and, you know, I use that term very loosely, but these got old and played out after the first time around, and everyone just hated them, so they stopped doing it after this map. But whether you're trying to tackle the main quest or the Easter egg, you're going to end up crafting these Tesla gun wonder weapons, encountering new enemies that were crafted specifically for this map, and having a really engaging sense of exploration, especially your first time around. It's a solid survival map alongside having fun Easter eggs to discover. The boss fight puts you up against Big Chungus himself, and the fight is essentially the same regardless of whether you do the main quest version or the Easter egg, but in any case, the Panzer Mortar is a great introduction to the boss mechanics in World War II, and is just challenging enough without being oppressive. The boss fight does drag on a bit, admittedly, and this fight can take upwards from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how you play it, but it's not bad by any means. I actually do like the design of the mini-bosses. You know, the whistling is great. You can shoot it to initiate this reactable straight-line charge, and it has a weak point on its back, so if you manipulate it in a way to be behind it, you can make quick work of these. It's very clever. The pests, admittedly, are far less interesting, but they're not offensive by any means. While there are some incredibly strong elements to this map, it's definitely not perfect. I really don't like the armor system in this game, and this is just more general of World War II zombies, but this was the first zombies to have what I call a cumulative damage system. Instead of a time-based damage system, the difference is armor is obviously an outside resource required to be at full health, whereas everything up to this point was a time-based, a fixed amount of time, you know, without damage will fully heal you no matter what. That's a rough description of what I'm getting at, but armor though in this game is terribly integrated. It's all tied to the point system, and as rounds go on, armor becomes absurdly expensive to a point of brokenness. Cold War fixed this very intelligently by making a different currency for armor maintenance instead of pulling from your bank of points. All in all, the Final Reich, while I have my nitpicks about, I cannot deny is by far the best designed map in the game, and is quite possibly the most fun as well. It's not nearly as interesting as Shadows of Evil on Black Ops 3 on disc, or even IW Spaceland, but it's a genuinely really good map for what they had to work with resource-wise and time for this game. This takes us to DLC 1, The Darkest Shore. Now, again, in theory, if nostalgia influences how much I enjoy a map at all, this was my first time I got flown out to play something early at Sledgehammer. The excitement of getting invited to my first event to play a zombies map would surely change how I feel about... I'm going to be honest, this is one of the worst maps in all of Call of Duty Zombies. Not including anything not a traditional round-based map, this is easily top 3 worst maps of all time. The map is set on a disgusting and filthy island, and one of the biggest pain points of World War II comes out in full force. The game just looks so bad. While visuals aren't a huge deal to me, especially if the gameplay is actually fun, this map, however, is not. The Darkest Shore has a far more monotonous setup process, less exploratory and rewarding like the Final Reich. This map has the mechanic that should have died in Call of the Dead. Fog comes in every few rounds and adds absolutely nothing to this experience. That and the main Easter egg is one of the worst designed I've ever seen. It's so horribly unfun. This has one of the worst wonder weapons, and the steps involving, you know, to do the main Easter egg and get the ripsaw are some of the most amateur I feel like have ever been made. The Darkest Shore it doesn't even have a good boss fight. It's not like you have a boss that you can learn and react to. The Moislers, that is what they're called in this map, are faster than the player, will basically one-shot your health and armor, and that on top of the fog reducing all vision, so you're pretty much forced to not move in a 4-stage moving boss fight. Look, even with all its glaring flaws, you may still enjoy this experience. In fact, enjoyment is in very large part subjective. However, quality, on the other hand, is not. And The Darkest Shore is not a quality map. I'm being really mean to this map, and to give credit where credit's due, it has some neat ideas. There's a step where you shoot boats from this like adjustable turret, kind of like Battleship. You open a secret cave with some crazy looking rituals to get a thing and stuff, and that's literally all. The problem is, The Darkest Shore puts all of the problems of World War II's basic mechanics on full display, with nothing else to really distract or carry it home. And Sledgehammer Games even know this wasn't their finest hour. This map was thrown together very clearly, and it just simply isn't fun to play for survival or even its quest. It also doesn't have the genius idea of the Final Reich with those 2 separate quests as well. It only has one. One miserable quest. DLC 2 was the Shadowed Throne. Again, was not even supposed to be DLC 2, so I think this map came out of the oven a little bit too quickly. In all fairness, the Shadowed Throne as a basic map is probably the second best in the game, arguably, and the Easter egg is alright for most steps. There's some interesting things in which you use the Wonder Weapon to discover all the small puzzles and that aren't annoying, but there is a safe step that you have to crack, and zombies will still bother you during this process, and it's one of the worst steps in this map if you're playing solo. The layout is surprisingly fluid, and the map's boss fight is okay. The actual boss himself isn't much of a threat. It's more of these surrounding enemies that are a danger, but it takes place in the Zeppelin that's flying above the map the whole time, so it's fun going to a unique area to take it on. The Shadow Throne has one of the worst mini-boss mechanics, however, and it's not thought through at all. Basically, the Zeppelin that flies above will make regular zombies into these red screechers indefinitely. You can't leave a zombie alive without it getting turned into one. Even if you're indoors, the Zeppelin will still hit it, and that zombie it makes is faster than the player can move. So effectively, you have no choice but to kill it or to let it kill you. And this basically means you cannot save a zombie to do Easter egg steps in this map, and many of the steps require you to be motionless for a pretty substantial amount of time. It's the biggest contradiction in game design I've possibly ever seen. I really like the Shadow Throne structurally and, just on a purely idea level, but this mechanic is a deathly oversight. It's probably the most interesting map in the game as far as side Easter eggs go, and it has a fairly unique, weapons and such as you go throughout the quest, but besides a few absolutely stupid mechanics, the Shadow Throne is fairly fun to play, and probably strikes the best balance between being fun for its quest and just fun for survival. DLC 3, The Tortured Path. My god, I don't even know if I can talk about this one. As mentioned, this was slapped together because the full boat experience had been cut down. So Sledgehammer Games tried what I'm going to call the first draft of the Outbreak formula. This is also the worst version of said experience. It's all wrong. Like, this includes 3 sub-maps, and if you're doing the quest, they have to be done in a very specific playlist, and the actual steps, I'm convinced they wanted them to be as annoying and unfun as possible. For example, in this map, you have to move a slow-ass regular zombie as he walks around the entire map at blistering speeds, and he can't get hit once. If he dies, you have to reset the game. The only cool part about the Tortured Path is, again, the sequence on the second map where you end up in this like ethereal underwater platformer segment. You get a recap of the events of the previous zombies maps, little jump puzzles to get to the next areas. This is an insanely good segment from a visual perspective and just basic gameplay. You've got this bit where you follow like a fish in a bucket, and if you get it wrong, you have more zombies spawn in. Like, it's so good, it does not belong in this experience, but everything around this small little bit is trash. Like, I don't even want to talk about it. I have a challenge for you. You know how Moist Critical did his Halo 2 Lasso challenge? I challenge someone to solo all 3 Tortured Path Easter eggs in the hardcore darkened path mode. But the kicker is, you have to have fun. You must complete it all in one go and enjoy yourself doing it. It's impossible, and it's so unfortunate because this wasn't even supposed to exist. And it does have, survival versions of each of these 3 respective maps, which are kind of fun to be fair, but as far as the Tortured Path itself goes, it's so badly set up, but like, who cares anymore? Finally, the last map in World War II Zombies was the Frozen Dawn, and from my understanding, there was also some rearranging with how this map took place, or at least there was supposed to be some kind of immediate sequel to this map that, of course, was never made. In any case, the Frozen Dawn surprised me. I actually liked it a lot more than I remembered. It's, at its essence, the World War II Zombies equivalent to Origins. It has 4 very unique Wonder Weapon quest formula, some standard puzzle-solving steps, and probably the best aesthetic and visual style to the map in all of World War II Zombies. However, as good as this map looks, this gives me an opportunity to level a gripe at this game in general. I always feel scammed with how my gun camos look. In the menus, they look bright, HD, and this should be an accurate representation of how the guns will look in-game. But I guess the way these maps are lit makes all the camos look so dull. Although there is a bug when swapping weapons, the camo looks like it's supposed to for a brief second, and then it just updates and goes back to looking awful again. I assume this is just to do with each, the way each World War II Zombies map is lit, but it's something that always drove me crazy about this game. You literally get catfished by good-looking gun camos. But anyways, back to the actual map. Like I said, it's laid out fairly well, and you have your standard zombie soulbox stuff, some puzzles you have to solve, and the upgrade quests for the wonder weapons are actually really unique. There's a segment where you walk on an invisible bridge, aligning stars with this sort of chalice thing. It's got some very nice visuals and pleasing aesthetics. I just like looking at this map. The Frozen Dawn does have its problems for sure, but I can overlook a lot of them because it has a great ending. It's got an insanely good boss fight against the God King.
Be gone, slut!
It's a boss with multi-layered mechanics, it's learnable and reactable, and it's entirely dependent on how well you communicate and execute with your team. It's very easy to fail. There are ways to break this boss fight in an instant, but when played normally and the way that it was intended and the design for it to play out, this is a super strong ending to finish out the DLC season. I would even say the Frozen Dawn is pretty on par with the Final Reich in terms of value and overall craft of content offered. However, with it being DLC 4, a much smaller amount of players admittedly ever got around to experiencing this one. This was the best way to end off the season of World War II Zombies, and upon my revisit, this was the map I had the biggest change of opinion on. It's worth noting in terms of additional content, World War II Zombies had survival maps like the 3 from the Tortured Path we just discussed, and Groston House, which I really like all of them for the most part, especially Groston House. They even have small Easter eggs in their own right, just despite being a tiny survival-based gameplay experience, and World War II Zombie systems complement this style of gameplay really well. Rating this experience, though, as a whole package, the season starts really strong with the Final Reich and Groston House. It definitely falls off in the middle, particularly with the Darkest Shore and the Tortured Path. The Shadow Throne is very okay, and then we have another pretty strong ending with the Frozen Dawn and the boss fight of that map in particular. All in all, I feel like it's just like the campaign. Strong start, drags a bit in the middle, and ends kind of strong. Not my favorite way to play zombies ever. I think it's very average when compared to other zombies titles. I do prefer this to Exo Zombies at least, but that's probably as far as I'd take it. It's got some of the best ideas in any zombies game, but the execution of said ideas can be downright laughable sometimes. Many systems introduced in this game clearly resonate into modern zombies, although Cold War in particular would clean up, polish, expand on, and ultimately perfect a lot of those initial mechanics. It's perfectly fine to play. I could just never justify playing World War II Zombies very often if given the choice to play about just any other Treyarch Zombies experience. Call of Duty World War II as a complete package does not have anything that stands out to me, or I feel does particularly the best. I would argue there's really no inherently bad or offensive parts of this game, but nothing ascends into greatness either by that same token, and that's the point I've been driving at this whole time. COD World War II is the greatest example of giving the community exactly what they claim to want, but in doing so, you wind up making a product that feels rehashed, old hat, and just downright average. We really don't know what it is we truly want from a video game until it's served to us. The dominance of Battle Royale over the traditional COD Arena format is clear proof of that reality. It was a good experiment for attempting to appease the fans' wishes to the most accurate degree, but at the end of the day, I think the mediocrity of the final product is on painfully full display when taking a good hard look at everything.